session of life processes. So in the last class we have discussed about the transportation in animals, where we studied about the different structures in the transportation system like the heart and the blood vessels, and there also we studied about the different circulatory systems in different animals. So in today's class we are going to study the transportation in plants. So far we studied that the plants absorbs or which gets the carbon dioxide to synthesis the food material by the process called photosynthesis, and also the plants uptake separately the different raw materials like the minerals and water for the process of growth, that is we call the life processes. To be the living thing, the plants requires carbon dioxide as well as the different minerals and water. So when you come to the plant transportation system, here two kinds of transportation system will take place, that is one is transportation of water and another one is transportation of food and other materials. So we will study about the two processes in the transportation of plants one by one. So as I told you, the different raw materials which are required for the growth of the plants which are taken out separately. So in a plant body, the distance between the source of energy and the uptake of water is small in case of small plants, where the materials of the energy as well as the raw materials like water and the minerals are transported in the opposite direction in the plants. If the distance is small between the source of energy and the uptake of water is very small, the transportation of both the materials in the opposite direction maybe takes place through the diffusion. And through the diffusion, the energy required by all the parts of the plant as well as water and the minerals from the root will transport throughout the plant body. If this distance is more, as in a tall trees, what happens? Diffusion process or the diffusion process alone can't be able to transport such a energy as well as the water throughout the plant body. So in the plant body, the transportation of such materials takes place through the root or diffusion process. In tall trees, the same thing, the transport of energy as well as the transport of water and minerals takes place by two different steps. As I told you, those two different steps are, one is root pressure and another one is transpiration. So before going to discuss with all these plants, in the plants, the raw materials like minerals and water are taken up by the structures that you know, the roots. From where the roots get such raw materials and the water is from the soil. So here the soil is the richest source which is available to the plants, which helps to absorb the minerals as well as water. So as I told you, small plants, the transportation takes place through the diffusion. Of course in the tall trees also it is through the diffusion, but only small x that I will explain later. So when you come to the different types of plants, so as their sizes and the structures changes in the plant body, they require the materials in the different way. They require the different energy ways in different plants. So in plants, when you go to study the different types of tissues, as you studied in your 9th class, where you studied the different structures or different tissues like the xylem and phloem. As you know, xylem conducts the water and phloem conducts the food, which is energy rich material which transport throughout the body. So when you study such tissues, there you study different types of tissues. Some are dead cells in such tissues. So as the plant body having the plenty of or more dead cells in its body, the energy required for the growth of the plant is very less compared to the other living organisms like a human beings. So here the point is that the plants requires less energy for its growth. So as it requires the less energy, however, it needs the transport of water and minerals throughout its body. So as I told you, so here I mentioned the diagram which indicates the uptake of water, that is transportation of water in the plants. As you study in your 9th class, that is xylem as well as phloem. Xylem and phloem, these two are the complex permanent tissues. These complex permanent tissues are responsible for the transport of water as well as food material. Here the xylem is the complex permanent tissue which transports water and minerals. Water and minerals. So the transport of water and minerals in case of the plant body takes place by the permanent tissue xylem by the structures in the plant body. Those are called roots. Roots absorbs water and minerals from the soil. This absorbed mineral and water is conducted or transported throughout the plant body. So when you come to the phloem, it is also a second type of complex permanent tissue where it transports food which is in the form of starch. Starch is the polysaccharide. Starch is the polysaccharide which is nothing but the combination of the glucose molecules and it forms the starch. This food is transported through the phloem and where it is synthesized? It is synthesized in the leaves. Synthesized in the leaves and it is transported throughout the body. Wherever the energy is necessary towards this food is transport through the structures or the tissues called phloem. Okay, let me start with the transportation of or transportation in plant. In that you are going to study transportation of water. Transportation of water. So the transportation of water in case of plants takes place by two methods. One is root pressure as well as the second step in the transportation of water in the plants is transpiration pull. That is transpiration. So this diagram is indicating the transportation of water in the plant body. This is the ground surface. And this is the soil and these are roots. So somewhat here is going to present the diagram is simple and these are steps. Okay, this is the simple diagram where I am going to show the transportation of water. So these are the two steps. What are those? Root pressure as well as transpiration pull are the two steps which are involved in the transportation of water. Let me start the root pressure. So in the last year in the 9th class we studied about the different types of tissue in the plants. There I mentioned like the xylem and phloem. So as the xylem is conducting the water and minerals throughout the plant body, in the transportation of water we are going to discuss the water conducting tissue xylem. Xylem tissue consists of 4 types of different cells. xylem, vessels. It also consists of tracheids, and this is having xylem parenchyma. Vessels, tracheids, xylem parenchyma, and one more type I have got remember. So only the transportation is takes place the xylem vessels. The another one I have not remember. Sorry for the names. So xylem vessels and the tracheids in the xylem tissue are responsible for the transportation of water. So here I am going to show you the schematic representation of how the water enters the root. So when you come to the roots, these roots absorbs the ions. Here the dots I have drawn here like ions, so maybe the different ions. And one more thing, the plants uptake the other raw materials apart from the water and minerals, phosphorus, nitrogen. Okay, so in the minerals, ions like the different elements have absorbed by the roots. These are absorbed by the roots. How this absorption takes place? This is in the active transport. What do you mean by active transport? Or the roots uptake the ions actively. Actively they take up the ions into the roots. What do you mean by active transport? Here is the definition: the process of uptake or transport of ions or materials from lower to higher concentration, with expenditure of energy, that is called active transportation. That is called active transportation. Here the definition is the process of transport of ions or molecules from lower to higher concentration, Here the thing is that roots already having such ions in the plenty number. Okay, plenty of such ions are present already in the roots. Even though it is having a plenty of such ions, it absorbs the ions from the soil called active process, which means from lower to higher concentration. Higher concentration of ions are already present in the roots, but also it is taking up such ions through the process called active process. Whenever the ions from such lower to higher concentration it is transported, that time it needs energy or it expends the energy. The ions are molecules from lower to higher concentration with expenditure of energy. With expenditure of energy is called what? Active transport. Similarly, one more point you should remember, that is called passive transport. That is passive transport. It is opposite to the active transport. What is that? The process of transportation or transport of ions or molecules from higher to lower concentration, opposite to the active transport without expenditure of energy, is called passive transport. Write down the definition for passive transport, your own definition. So here what happens? The roots uptake the ions actively into its xylem, into the xylem of the roots. Xylem of the roots, the ions enters into the roots. The xylem of root, stem as well well as leaves are interconnected. So remember the point. The xylem of roots as well as stem and leaves are interconnected. Whenever the roots uptake the ions actively, the concentration of such ions in the roots will be more. Okay, as the concentration of such ions in the roots is more, the concentration of it creates the concentration gradient or differences, concentration gradient difference between the root as well as soil. Here what happens, as the concentration of ions in the roots becomes more and in the soil it is less, the water from the soil enters into the root to neutralize or to minimize such a concentration gradient. Whenever the water enters the water into the xylem of the roots, it is transported to the up to the plant. So here transportation of water during the root pressure. Here root pressure is means whenever the root absorbs the ions by active process, it creates the concentration gradient. To neutralize or to minimize such a concentration gradient, the water from the soil enters into the what? Xylem of the roots. Whenever the water enters, the water moves upward towards the plant body. So it creates the pressure, that is what we call root pressure. The water which is moves upward the plant body, which is only some extent. The water moving up from the root to the plant body is only minimum. Means the root transport the absorbed water and minerals only some extent of the plant height, not to the up to its tip. Okay, then what happens? What it will do for the transport of this water which is present or which is transported or which is pulled or which is moved up only some distance. So as I mentioned you, the second type of step or second step in the transportation of water is called transpiration pulling. That is transpiration. One is root pressure. So transpiration, as you know, the process of loss of water in the form of water vapor or in the form of vapor through the leaves. As you know, leaves its surface is composed of the tiny structures called as stomata. Stomata are helps for the exchange of gases as well as the transpiration. So what happens in higher plants? The leaves have a stomata. These stomata are responsible for the transpiration, which means the loss. Whenever the guard cell of such stomata structures are open or turgid, and then they open the stomatal aperture or stomatal pore. Through the stomatal pore, the gases exchange also takes place and the loss of water takes place. So whenever the loss of water from the stomata from the leaves takes place, during that time the xylem which are connected to the stem as well as leaves, the water will move to the xylem and the leaves, to the xylem of the leaves and the stem. From the xylem of the leaves, the water then diffuses towards the stomatal aperture. From the stomatal aperture, it will be eliminated in the form of water vapor, that is transpiration. So whenever the loss of water from the aerial parts of the leaves takes place, that time it pulls the water from the xylem of the leaves as well as stem. Whenever it pulls during the transpiration, so this is the name transpiration pull. So this is how the root pressure as well as transpiration pull perform the transportation of water in the plants. It forms the continuous where the two steps involved in the transportation of water are root pressure as well as transpiration. During root pressure, the root actively absorbs the ion from the soil and it creates a concentration gradient between the soil as well as root. During this time, what happens? The root, where it is having a higher concentration of ion, to neutralize or to minimize such a higher concentration gradient, the water enters into the roots and it pushes the water up to some distance. In small plants, the diffusion of such water molecules as well as minerals takes place throughout the plant body. Whenever you compare to the higher plants, only up to some extent or some distance only the root pressure is helps for the transportation of water. Then this pushed water is again pulled by the transpiration process which takes place in the leaves through the stomata. Whenever the transpiration occurs through the stomata in the leaves, the xylem of the leaves and the stems of the plant body pulls the water from the lower part of the plant body during its transpiration. This is how the transportation of water in case of plants takes place. So, in the next class, we are going to study the transportation of food material or energy in the form of starch. How it is transported or transportation takes place of such a food material from the synthesizing organ like leaves to the different parts of the